In the early morning suburbs of Columbus, hints of spring were beginning to appear in the still dark sky. In the residential area near Easton Town Center, lights were starting to flicker on here and there. April Wilson woke up before her alarm clock rang. Listening to her husband Stephen's breathing beside her, she realized another long day was about to begin. The clock showed 5:45 a.m. April quietly slipped out of bed and made her way through the dimly lit hallway to the kitchen. Her first task of the day was preparing breakfast for her mother-in-law Martha. Martha needed care due to spinal stenosis and required meals and medication at specific times. The doctors at Riverside Methodist Hospital had repeatedly emphasized the importance of maintaining a regular schedule. On the doormat lay a stack of bills that had arrived late the previous night. April picked them up and placed them on the kitchen table. Electric bill, water bill, and hospital treatment bills. The monthly payments far exceeded Martha's pension of $1,800. "Good morning, April." When she entered the living room, Martha was already awake and sitting in her armchair. She had lived alone in this 35-year-old house since losing her husband 20 years ago. On the wall hung a photograph of Martha and her husband in their younger days. Next to it was Laura's graduation photo. Over the 10 years since April had married into the family, life in this house had gradually changed. "Good morning. Did you sleep well? How's the pain?" April began preparing breakfast with practiced hands, oatmeal with fruit and warm herbal tea. While chopping organic fruit bought from Kroger, she kept an eye on her mother-in-law's condition. Although Martha had savings of about $150,000, it wasn't nearly enough for a care facility. Nearby facilities cost over $8,000 per month. That's why April cared for her mother-in-law while working 4 days a week as a home helper. Laura called yesterday. April's hands froze momentarily at Martha's words. Laura was her sister-in-law, Martha's only daughter. April had heard she recently lost her job as an accountant. Sometimes she would appear with expensive designer bags, only to disappear quickly. April felt something unsettling about her lifestyle. Did she need something? Yes, she said she wants to have a family discussion. "April, you'll be there too, won't you?" There was a hint of anxiety in Martha's voice. April silently put the oatmeal in the microwave. It was unusual for Laura to suggest a family meeting. She had been showing up less frequently lately. She rarely appeared even for Sunday after church brunch. After finishing breakfast preparation, April brewed her own coffee. She could hear Stephen coming down the stairs. Her husband, who ran an insurance agency, always left early for work. They used to enjoy breakfast together and discuss their plans for the day. Now, their conversations were purely practical. 10 years into their marriage, an invisible wall had formed between them. "I'll be late again today." "I understand." "You won't need dinner then?" "No." After exchanging just these brief words, Stephen left. April was beginning to feel worn down by life with a husband who was frequently absent, even on holidays, citing work reasons. They had no children. This marriage wasn't what she had hoped for. After breakfast, April checked Martha's medication and helped her change. She fixed her gray hair and assisted with makeup. This had been her daily routine for 10 years. At 9 a.m., she would start her work as a home care helper. Between caring for other families, she would occasionally call to check on Martha. Then at 4 p.m., as soon as work ended, she would return to Martha's house to resume care duties. Bathing assistance, dinner preparation, medication management, her life was dominated by this daily routine. They sometimes had dinner at the nearby Cracker Barrel, though less frequently lately. Instead, she had been making homemade meatloaf more often. Martha had always valued home cooking, and April had inherited that value. A spring breeze shook the cherry tree branches in the garden. Another season of blossoms had arrived. This daily routine was supposed to continue tomorrow and the day after. Church volunteer work, interactions with neighbors, everything existed as unchanging constants. One day, a heavy atmosphere hung in Martha's living room. Martha sat in her armchair, looking more tired than usual. April quietly sat in the chair to her right. Laura sat on the sofa facing Martha, with a large leather bag beside her. By the window, Stephen stared at his smartphone screen, showing no interest in the proceedings. "Shall we begin?" Laura's voice echoed in the silent room. She adjusted her expensive brand-name scarf while emanating the scent of new perfume. Though she had supposedly lost her job recently, her appearance seemed more extravagant than before. "It's time for us as a family to seriously consider Mother's future." April felt something off about her sister-in-law's tone. Laura, who usually took a dismissive attitude toward her mother, was being unusually polite today. "What exactly do you mean?" Martha asked quietly. Her hands were trembling more noticeably than usual. "I think we should consider placing you in a facility," Laura continued, as if reading from a prepared statement. "I'm concerned about the maintenance costs of this house. Property taxes are rising, and repair costs keep mounting. But that's not necessary yet." Martha's voice trembled. "I'm still doing well, and April helps me." "That's another problem." Laura took out an expensive fountain pen and began writing something on her paper. "The dependency on April is too high. This isn't a healthy family relationship." The sound of rain against the windows grew stronger. April felt her hands growing cold in her lap. Stephen continued looking at his smartphone, showing no sign of defending his wife. "In my opinion," Laura continued without looking up from her paper, "we should properly manage Mother's assets to provide better care. Specifically." "Wait." Martha suddenly interrupted in a strong voice. The atmosphere in the living room instantly froze. Martha slowly straightened her back and looked directly at Laura. In her eyes was a strong will that April had never seen before. "I have something to say." Martha's voice was surprisingly firm. "I want to tell everyone my decision." April noticed something different about her mother-in-law's expression. Her usual gentle smile was gone, replaced by what appeared to be firm resolve. "My daughter is my true family. She should inherit everything." When those words were uttered, the room's atmosphere seemed to come to a complete stop. Outside the window, the rain grew heavier, but even that sound seemed distant. A dull pain spread through April's chest. 10 years of caregiving. Daily thoughtfulness. Time spent together. All of it seemed to lose its color in an instant. Her vision began to blur slightly. A faint triumphant smile appeared on Laura's lips. Stephen looked up from his smartphone for the first time, showing a confused expression. "That's fine. I was planning to leave sooner or later anyway. April's voice was surprisingly calm, even to herself. She slowly stood up and carefully returned the chair to its original position. April, wait. Martha's voice trembled slightly. But April didn't look back. She picked up her bag and walked straight to the entrance. While she put on her shoes, no one came after her. As she opened the front door, thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. April stepped out into the rain without opening an umbrella. The sound of the door closing echoed like a final farewell. And finally, she could let her tears flow without anyone seeing them. In the pouring spring rain, April's car slowly drove away from the road she had traveled for 10 years. April's car was heading toward her parents' apartment where she used to live. The sound of wipers clearing the rain seemed to synchronize with her irregular heartbeat. When she stopped at a traffic light on High Street, her phone rang again. A call from Stephen. Before that, calls from Laura, and Martha too. But April couldn't bring herself to answer. 10 years' worth of exhaustion seemed to suddenly wash over her. Her parents' apartment was about a 15-minute drive from Riverside Methodist Hospital. Her parents had moved to Florida 5 years ago, and the apartment had been rented out, but the tenant had just moved out last month. April had a key. It was as if it had been prepared for this day. After parking in the lot, April got out with only the bare essentials: wallet, change of clothes, and makeup pouch. All the mementos collected during her 10 years of marriage were left at Martha's house. She didn't even have the courage to touch them now. Room 301. While climbing the dark stairs, April traced old memories. In high school, she had said goodbye to her first love on these stairs. After college graduation, she had shared the joy of finding a job with her parents. And the excitement of meeting Stephen and deciding to marry. Everything felt like a distant past. Opening the apartment door, musty air hit her nose. There was minimal furniture, and an old calendar still hung on the wall. April sat on the sofa and let out a deep sigh. Her phone rang again. This time from an unknown number. April decided to turn it off. Is this right? She asked herself in the empty room. Was this really the right thing to do? Outside the window, the rain grew stronger. Distant lightning occasionally illuminated the room with a bluish-white light. April sat hugging her knees. Her body, suddenly released from the daily caregiving routine she had maintained for 10 years, was enveloped in a strange feeling of exhaustion. Looking back, there had been signs from the beginning of her marriage. Stephen's work-first lifestyle, Laura's unnatural behavior, and Martha's occasionally anxious expressions. However, April had continued pretending not to notice. Or perhaps she hadn't wanted to notice. An old full-length mirror leaned against the corner of the room. Her reflection in it felt strangely detached. 36 years old. No children, a half-baked career. And now, even losing her family. Words of prayer naturally came to her lips. She had attended church every Sunday and followed the Bible's teachings. Yet why had it come to this end? Late at night, April fell asleep on the sofa. An improvised bed without pillow or blanket. However, for the first time in years, she could spend a night without having to take care of anyone. By sunrise, the rain had stopped. Bird songs announcing the start of a new day could be heard from outside the window. April turned on her phone. Immediately, notifications of incoming calls appeared one after another. Over 20 missed calls. And one voicemail. It was Martha's voice. Tearful and trembling softly. "I have something important to tell you. Please come right away, please." April listened to that voice for a long time. There was an urgency in it that she had never heard before. Martha's voice contained something different from mere apology or pleading. April took a deep breath and slowly stood up. Her reflection in the mirror looked different from last night. Though the dark circles remained under her eyes, strength had returned to her expression. I can't leave her alone. That decision settled surprisingly easily in her heart. The 10 years of caregiving hadn't been just duty. There had been a real bond. Something's wrong. Her instinct told her so. There was something unmistakable in the tremor of Martha's voice. April washed her face and changed into fresh clothes. Without putting on makeup, she grabbed her bag. Taking only the essential items, she gripped her car keys. Her car quietly drove out into the Columbus streets, shrouded in morning mist. A different scenery from yesterday hinted at the beginning of a new story. When April arrived at Martha's house, she sensed an atmosphere clearly different from yesterday. The usual sound of the TV, the noises from the kitchen, all were absent. Only a heavy silence enveloped the entire house. The newspaper lay abandoned at the entrance. The mailbox was stuffed with what looked like bills. A scene that April would have immediately organized until yesterday. Opening the front door, she heard a small sound from the living room. There sat Martha, looking completely exhausted. Gone were the strong tone and resolute attitude from yesterday, replaced by deep fatigue. Laura was nowhere to be seen. The coffee cup on the table had gone cold. Only the clock hands mercilessly marked time. "April, you came." Martha's voice trembled slightly. She wore the same clothes as yesterday, suggesting she hadn't slept. April quietly sat down in front of her mother-in-law. Morning sunlight streaming through the window cast long shadows between them. On the table lay an unusual stack of documents. Envelopes with bank logos, online banking statements, and handwritten notes. April didn't yet know the truth these would reveal. "I need to tell you something," Martha sighed deeply. In her hand, she clutched her usual prescription medication. "But before that, let me apologize for yesterday." April shook her head. Her mother-in-law's demeanor was so different from usual. "Right now, I'm more worried about you." Martha's hands were shaking. April knew this wasn't just due to illness. Fear. Yes, clear fear showed in her mother-in-law's eyes. The living room air contained something heavier than yesterday's tension. Laura. Martha's voice caught. "She's been embezzling my pension." April's spine froze. Martha slowly opened the documents on the table. They were copies of bank statements. Among the meticulously recorded entries, maintained by years of habit, lay records of unnatural withdrawals. $500 every month, for 2 years. Martha's hands trembled as she turned the pages. "I didn't notice." She changed the online banking settings. The statements held clear evidence. Every 15th of the month, a $500 withdrawal. Though the recipient names were cleverly disguised, all transfers went to the same account. But that's not all. Martha lowered her voice. Outside, the mailman passed by. The usual daily routine now felt strangely distant. She seems to have debts. Large debts. April caught her breath. How much? $400,000. That number sank into the room like heavy lead. Martha pulled out new documents. They were casino point card statements. At the casino, and from some very dangerous people. Martha took out her phone. Listen to this. A recorded voice began playing in the silent room. A man's voice. Low and cold. Deadline's the end of this month. If you can't get the money ready, let's talk about collateral. Get your mother's house deed ready. Or else. April's hands trembled. The icy voice on the phone clearly contained threats. The recording date was 3 days before yesterday's family meeting. Everything started connecting. The sudden family meeting. The proposal for facility admission. And those words. My words yesterday, she made me say them. Tears flowed from Martha's eyes. Deep fatigue marks were etched on her face without makeup. She threatened to call the police and have me sent to a facility if I sold the house. April stood up and sat next to her mother-in-law. Martha's shoulders trembled minutely. An appointment slip from Riverside Methodist Hospital fluttered in the breeze on the table. What should I do? That voice was filled with boundless despair. Outside, birds sang of spring's arrival. Their cheerful voices now seemed strangely discordant. First, this. April took documents from her bag. Materials she had printed last night at her parents' apartment. Contact information for Adult Protective Services. I researched it last night. Martha looked at April with surprise. And this too. She pulled out a lawyer's business card. An elder abuse specialist. I've already made an appointment. April, you. New light dawned in Martha's eyes. Her expression overflowed with emotions long suppressed. I've been caring for you for 10 years, April's voice was quiet but firm. It was never meaningless. If there's something I can do now. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Both held their breath. At the sound breaking the morning silence, Martha's body trembled slightly. April stood up and peeked through a gap in the curtains. A police patrol car was parked outside. They had come to follow up on the anonymous report April had made late the previous night. Martha momentarily flinched at the sight of the uniformed officers. It's okay. April held her mother-in-law's hand. It was cold but conveyed definite warmth. You don't have to bear this alone anymore. Martha slowly nodded. The two stood up and headed for the entrance. Spring light illuminated their new step forward. From reporting to trial. It would surely be a long journey. But there was no turning back now. A month after the incident, her life had changed significantly. April, who had resumed living at Martha's house, continued her devoted care as before. But now it was different. Between caregiving duties, she studied for her care worker certification. Professional books piled on the table, covered in sticky notes. More for mother. That thought had become her new goal. Divorce proceedings had begun with Stephen. They tried church counseling, but their estranged hearts wouldn't return. He remained absorbed in work, feigning indifference to this incident as well. Thanks to their prenuptial agreement, property division issues would likely be minimal. The incident's aftermath created bigger ripples than expected. Laura was arrested for embezzlement and intimidation, and is currently out on bail. The trial is expected to result in a suspended sentence. Though Martha struggled deeply with the decision to prosecute her daughter, she stood firm on the witness stand. Her courageous action drew support from the local elder support group. Laura, now participating in a gambling addiction treatment program, had begun facing her problems for the first time. Her casino debts had left irreparable scars on her life. However, according to her counselor at the rehabilitation facility, she was sincerely engaging with the treatment. A repayment plan for the $400,000 debt was gradually taking shape with the cooperation of lawyers and financial institutions. Changes had come to the house as well. With support from Adult Protective Services, a new care system was established. Weekend volunteers from Meals on Wheels visited, and they began participating in activities at the local senior center. Martha's health had mysteriously improved. Perhaps freed from the weight of pressure, her expression brightened, and she became more positive about rehabilitation. April's phone rang. It was from the lawyer specializing in elder abuse. There was an important meeting today. They needed to discuss revising the living will and setting up a new power of attorney. The authority Laura had previously held needed to be changed to a more trustworthy arrangement. April, Martha called from the living room. "Shall we have breakfast at Cracker Barrel?" Her voice held not a trace of its former darkness. April couldn't help but smile. Their relationship had grown even deeper through this incident. Though not related by blood, she felt the bonds of true family. Outside, church bells rang, announcing Sunday service. They were about to head out for their usual after-church brunch. They would exchange words with neighbors, listen to Bible teachings, and share hope for the new week ahead. It was a peaceful and certain moment of daily life. Regular progress reports arrived from Laura's facility as well. Updates on her progress in the rehabilitation program, developments in counseling, and most importantly, the gradual emergence of remorse. Though complete reconciliation might still be a long way off, a small light of hope had begun to appear. April opened her planner to check today's schedule. Church in the morning, meeting with the lawyer in the afternoon, and care worker study group in the evening. It would be a busy day. However, her expression showed no sign of fatigue. Rather, it held the glow of someone who had found a new mission. "I'm ready." Martha appeared in the living room, wearing her coat. April gently supported her mother-in-law's arm as they headed to the entrance. The spring sunshine warmly illuminated their new step forward. Sometimes, the strongest light is found in the deepest darkness. April had learned this truth firsthand. Caregiving, betrayal, and reconciliation. All of these had given new meaning and depth to her life. Before leaving the entrance, April looked back at the house. She would never lose this family again. With that vow in her heart, she stepped out into the light of a new morning.